Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, a couple of games that never got made, that Zelda trailer though, and part 2 of our hardware roundup. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, joined as always by my co-host Mark Mitchell.
How's it going, Patrick?
Doing well, Mark. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well too.
Yeah, I just took my socks off.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm in my own home, so I feel like it's okay for me to do that. If we were in like a professional studio, I don't think I would.
No, especially if we were renting the space.
I don't see now that you put like renting. Like now, I think I'm paying for it. Why shouldn't I be able to take my socks off?
Because other people are also renting it.
I suppose that's a good point. That's a good point. I apologize. Should I put my socks back on?
No. You're misconstruing this. I'm saying for your own safety.
Oh,
Other people
I
are
understand.
renting it. Like, what if there's like AIDS needles lying around?
What if? I mean, that's a great point. I don't want to. How disappointed would you be if you got AIDS from not wearing socks one day in the recording studio?
Disappointed is not the word I would use.
What word? Devastated?
Yeah.
Oh, Mark. Yeah. So we're doing good, right?
Yeah.
We're doing great. No one has sock AIDS.
Nope.
How we got to talk about the weather.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Of course. Kind of the exact same as last week's weather report,
Yep.
right? Great.
Chilly but pleasant.
Yes. I've been enjoying chilly but pleasant. It's been cold at night.
Mm-hmm.
I pulled out, I have a blanket. It's a very large, thick, heavy blanket. I just glanced over at the couch to see if it was there. It is not there.
No, it's not.
It is a thick, heavy, furry blanket that we seldom have opportunity to use in Los Angeles, but we are using it, let me tell you. It gets too hot all the time, but I love it regardless. Do you have any tricks for beating the cold?
No, not really.
All right. It's not really that cold, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at night it gets down to like the low 40s.
Everyone is laughing at us right now, Mark. Everyone.
Not if they're listening in LA.
Great point.
They're commiserating.
All right. So that was the weather.
Which is like has always been a unofficial official segment, but is slowly just becoming like we should play the theme music before we do it.
I'm not putting it on our show outline, okay? I'm just not. So we have introduced a new segment called the debug segment, wherein you help us debug our show and tell us where we were wrong. But I guess we were so right last week that no one had anything to say. And we were talking about Pokemon, and Mark and I don't know Pokemon that well.
We said perfection was our goal.
That's right. So if you get back to us with your debuggings of either past episodes or future episodes
or
this episode, thank you, Mark. You can write into us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com, and we will read your debug on the podcast. Mark, what have you been playing?
Pokemon Sun and Moon.
Yep.
Less like often
Mhm.
as I was playing it the past couple of weeks as I was trying to like get through it as much.
Are you still on that third island?
Yeah, I'm like more like casually taking my time.
Yeah.
Talking to some NPCs now.
Yeah.
Turns out you get quite a few items from them.
You get a ton of items from talking to NPCs. That's how I spent most of my first 2 islands worth of experience talking to people.
But I've also been playing on the NES Classic Edition. I've been trying my hand at Ghost and Goblins.
How are you able to... Tell me how you like it first.
I'm terrible at it.
I don't think you are. I think you could be very good at it and still just die all the time. It's so hard.
It's really hard. But the thing which I didn't know, so I was listening to a podcast that I listen to every week called Retronauts, and they discuss classic games. And last week they were talking about like lesser known Japanese developers
Yeah.
and kind of like bad games. And the NES port of Ghost and Goblins came up, and I didn't notice that the NES port wasn't done by Capcom. They farmed it out to like a company called Micronix, and nobody knows for sure because a lot of the history of these Japanese studios is just kind of lost to time.
Yeah.
But
it's before like anyone was really keeping track of all of this stuff.
Right, I mean, we don't even know when games came out.
Right,
know,
and
like,
I mean, like this is also back when the credits of video games had all like call signs that like people weren't using their real names and be like, "What Red One? Who designed this thing?"
But apparently, Micronix like could possibly have just been one person, and with like no access to the source code of the arcade version of Ghost and Goblins. So they were just kind of like doing it. They were just like eyeing it and just being like,
wow.
"Oh, this is like an approximation." And so that's apparently why the NES port is so bad, I guess.
And like punishing.
Yeah.
How far are you able to get in that game?
I can get to like the third level.
That's amazing.
Fairly consistently, but that is after like a good like work day's worth of playing. Oh no, I should clarify. I wasn't working but like 8 hours. I put in like 8 hours.
Yeah, I think that tracks, and that's why I was laughing. That's a long time.
So I mean, like like we've talked about before, in general with the NES Classic Edition, like I'm just not as good at these games as I used to be. Like I used to be able to cruise through Super Mario Brothers 3 with like no effort, and I was getting frustrated with myself because playing it again.
Yeah,
I'm not able to just like cruise through, and you
gotta earn it now.
You have to earn it now, and so it's possible that when I was 8, I would be able to get to the 4th level of Ghost and Goblins in a couple hours instead of putting an entire 8 hours into trying to get to past the 3rd level. And I have given up. I'm not going to try to go any further. Yeah, it's just like it doesn't feel worth it.
Are you having fun while you're playing it?
Not enough to keep going, but enough to like put in the time.
Yeah,
because I outside of watching a speed run or two, I've never this is the furthest I've ever gotten in this game.
Sure.
But yeah, it was also it's also interesting for me playing this because my only experience playing it was like at a friend's house as a kid, and as kids I had no really concept of like whether it was, like something was a good game or a bad game.
Yeah,
I just accepted every game kind of on its own terms, and there were games that I liked playing more than others. But even like a terrible game or like a bad port, quote unquote,
yeah,
like I had no idea. So I as a kid, I wasn't like, oh, this game is bad. I was just like, oh, this game is super hard, or like I don't like this game as much.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I played the NES version of Rampage from start to finish, and that game will last like 4 hours of just you like climbing buildings and punching stuff. It's not fun by any stretch of the imagination.
My mom bought us Superman 64.
Yeah.
And I'm sure because it was cheap, and we had and it wasn't until many, many years later that I found out that it was considered one of the worst games of all time, because I played through that to, I don't know if it's beatable, but like to as far as I was able to and I just wasn't able to purse.
Right.
But I put hours into that game, and I knew it wasn't as good as like Super Mario 64, but I wasn't like, oh, this is a bad game. I was just like, oh, this is like not as fun.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe it's a function of being a kid, and maybe it's a function of it being like long enough ago that we didn't have a like big enough selection of video games where you're like, I can't play a game unless it's excellent. Which is where I feel like that's where we are now. But man, like how nice to be a kid and just be like, whatever I've got, I'm just gonna play it, and like I'm gonna have fun with it. It doesn't need to be perfect, and it can even be bad, and I'll have a good time.
Yeah,
with
just
it.
the very act of playing video games was enough to amuse me.
You're Superman. I mean, come on.
Well, what have you been playing?
So I have also been playing Pokemon Sun and Moon, also taking it easy, like you are.
Island style.
Yeah, just going at island speed, brah. I did the weird little man-made islands. There's like a tiny little bit that you do between the second and third island.
Oh, yeah. When you go to like the Institute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
real strange. The game starts to get like real strange there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm still liking it. But I
Also, did you recognize, like, it wasn't until later that I was like, because I had totally forgot about the short cutscene that opens
yeah,
with Lily like running away from people in white like outfits,
yeah,
and then like her Pokemon
yeah,
like
whatever its name is.
yeah, and it wasn't until I went, like, I was in the Institute for a little bit, and then I was like, oh, this is the place from the beginning of the game, that opening cutscene.
I don't remember the beginning of the game. I have also been playing, and this is a very recent development, I've been playing Donkey Kong Country Returns Tropical Freeze.
Now, this one did not get ported to the 3DS, right? Was it the first one or is
That's
this
correct.
the one that was ported?
No, so the one that was ported to the 3DS was just Donkey Kong Country Returns, which was originally released on the Wii, ported to the 3DS.
Right.
This is the sequel on the Wii U. And I am one world into it at this point. And I think I came to a conclusion about the Donkey Kong Country games. They're like Nintendo taking a crack at Sonic the Hedgehog, but without the speed. They feel similarly like platformy and a little bit awkward, with a lot of things to find in the worlds, and like, animal character based. And I suppose that's where the analogy stops. But like I like it similarly. Like it feels like a good Sonic game, but without the speed.
Do you how familiar are you with Donkey Kong Country Returns by Rare? Like, like the ones for the Super Nintendo.
Sure. So I the first game I love, and have played from start to finish more times than I can count. And I have all three of them on my 3DS. And I've played a little bit of the Game Boy versions as well, which are totally different games.
Because I'm pretty much in the same boat, and because I consider the retro ones, these newest ones, Donkey Kong Country Returns, to be pretty different from the Rare ones.
Yeah,
so when
I
you're
agree.
saying that they're like Nintendo taking a crack at Sonic games, do you mean the new ones, the ones by Retro?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's less. They have the levels are less vertical than like a Sonic level usually is. But like there's something about the way the character moves and weighs, and like also just when you get far enough into a modern Sonic game where like every turn could be punishing, because the games are extraordinarily hard. Like really tough, precise, fast platforming. So I don't know. It feels good. I think it's better than the first Donkey Kong Country Returns, if by sheer virtue of not having to shake to make.
Yeah,
them
I was gonna
roll.
say, because I played the one on the Wii.
Yeah.
And I think I should play, if I were going to play it again, I played the 3DS version.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have that. You don't have to shake, and
like I'm not one of those like I don't like waggle mechanics at all, but like it's just such an imprecise way to make Donkey Kong roll. Like it doesn't make any sense. Like do it in Mario Galaxy and like he hits something, great, makes perfect sense to me. But just like the timing of it and having to use it to like jump across longer pits or whatever, it just doesn't work. But yeah, it's really good on the 3DS.
now
Would recommend.
You've owned Tropical Freeze for a while. Is this your first time playing through it?
That's not true. I bought Tropical Freeze just over the weekend.
Oh.
It was it and Super Mario 3D World are both part of the Nintendo Selects program, and Amazon was selling them at like 30% off or something. So I got the game for $14.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought you had owned it for
Mark. That's not true.
Okay. I don't have anything I was mistaken. I apologize.
It's all right. I accept your apology. And I'm not as mad as I sound. Do I sound really mad? All right, that's good. Let's get into the news.
So the Game Awards happened this past week.
Right, and we did not live crap on it.
No, because neither of us watched them.
I watched the pre-show.
I didn't watch any of it.
All right, very good.
I saw quote unquote highlights after the fact.
So we're just going right back to dumping on the on the Game Awards.
The Breath of the Wild teaser was shown. There was both I think it was during the pre-show.
Mm-hmm.
There was a short trailer that was maybe like a minute 30 seconds.
So but before the show, that's when they actually played the trailer, and then during the show is when they did Bill Trinan and someone else from Nintendo did a little Let's Play.
That was during the show.
That was during the show.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So we both kind of got what we wanted out of it.
Yeah.
We saw a little sword play, and we saw some NPCs / maybe a town. Don't really know.
Yep.
Kind of looked like a traveling carnival.
It did look carnival-y.
Yeah, there was I think a carousel, under a big tent type thing.
Yeah, and there's that building under a giant horse head. That seemed pretty cool. Let's talk about these NPCs a little bit, because we see a kind of lady character wearing that kind of blue adventuring garb
in what looked more like a cutscene than gameplay, and it's in my opinion very clearly Zelda. But
they're just not showing us.
Well, they haven't. They're not, because it's all in close-ups,
mm-hmm.
and from the neck down, or from the waist up. So you don't see a face ever, which I guess they haven't shown us what Zelda looks like at all in any of the trailers or anything. It's all focused on Link.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm thinking that this
is the first time that we're seeing any part of any character that's not Link,
other than the old man NPC at the beginning of the E3 demo.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think you're right. I'm guessing it's Zelda.
It would make sense. I mean, if it's anyone else, we'd be like, who?
Yeah.
It's got to be Zelda.
But yeah, doesn't look too much, like a princess. Looks pretty much like Link, outfit-wise, costume-wise.
Yeah. I mean, it even when they start to show us towns and stuff, like you said, it seems like it's more of a traveling civilization and less of, we don't see big castles. Anything that is a big castle is basically in ruin. So I wonder if there even is a functional, monarchy for Zelda to be the princess of.
Yeah, there's a big kind of to your point of this idea of vagabonds, travelers. They're one of the NPCs that they show is a big bird who seems to be a bard.
Talk about this bird.
I love it. We only see it for
too.
A few seconds. But it's a bard who has an accordion,
mm-hmm.
and
a big bow and arrow. I guess it's just the bow, slung over his shoulders. And he's there for a second, and then he zips back up to a bird ship or something. It looks like it's borrowing elements from Skyward Sword, with that sort of here's a world above the clouds,
mm-hmm.
which I guess there's a little bit of that in Twilight Princess too. But that's cool. I would love to meet more of that guy.
What do you think of the for all the changes that have seemed to happening in Breath of the Wild? It appears from the little bit we've seen that NPCs are not going to be voice acted. That it's going to be walk up.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to make some blah, 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 noises. Yeah, while the text box scrolls below. I have no issue with this. I don't even really. I can most people. I can we can read faster than we can listen, and so I'm usually skipping voice acting anyways.
Yeah.
But So to me, it's no big deal. I kind of prefer it over voice acting. But what is your take?
I would say that I have a similar take. I love it when video games are incredibly well voice acted. But I feel like that's the floor for me. It has to be amazing, and then I'm like, okay, fine. Like most voice acting in video games, I immersion breaking, like where you're just like, oh, okay, I'm playing a video game. I'm playing a bad Japanese cartoon, poorly dubbed,
And I also feel like it's like reading where um I enjoy being able to, and not even that I have like a specific like concrete voice for every character, but I prefer it being in my head versus, necessarily like the choice that somebody made to be like, this is what the character sounds like.
Yeah. Well, and also, while you were saying that, it made me think of like the way we interact with a video game is more like how we interact with a book or a comic or whatever, than a movie, where like a movie is a totally passive experience, and so you have no control over the speed of the dialogue or what someone sounds like. But in a video game, you are necessarily interacting with it, just like you do with a book or a comic book. I'm sorry, I keep inserting comic book in this too. Just, most of my reading is comics. That like you're playing an active role in like putting that reality together. So like if suddenly there's a voice speaking things, like now you're seeding that little bit of interactivity with the thing.
I totally agree. And in general, I'm not a huge fan of the trends towards making games cinematic, like more like
Yes.
movies,
because they're not movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think even if we're not like conscious of it, we're not like, oh, having voice acting is taking me out of this game. I do think it is something that happens, like, and games like Uncharted or The Last of Us, where the voice acting, I would say, is for the most part very good.
Yeah.
Those games strive to be cinematic, and they are very good experiences for what they are, but I don't know that they're the best like games.
Yeah, they're almost more very rewarding cinematic experiences than they are rewarding games. And they like I would say that they almost use gameplay as a way to serve the storytelling rather than the story as a way to serve the game.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And it would be weird if Zelda did that.
Yeah,
Right? Like
absolutely.
it would be I wouldn't be into it. Did you watch the Let's Play video?
I did, yeah.
I'm less excited from what we get out of the Let's Play video. First of all, it looked like it was chugging, right? Like it didn't look to me like it was running very smoothly.
Yeah, I didn't really notice, but I think the Switch version will be the version to get.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. It'll break my heart if this game comes out and like it performs poorly. Not like that it sells bad, but like just that it can't run on the hardware.
I don't think Nintendo releases games like that.
That's true.
So,
That's true.
I mean, it may not run as smoothly, but I think it'll be fine at the end of the day on the Wii U.
Sure. And even finer on that Switch. I'm not sure I even made it through the video because it was chugging a lot, and like I don't know, there's like two 40-year-old 50-year-old guys on the couch like, and now we're talking to this guy. And
well, that's why it's so weird to me that they played it during the actual Game Awards.
The Game Awards are weird, man.
I assume they just dropped it. Like it was like, oh, here's the trailer, and then like check out our YouTube page if you want to see the Let's Play. Because I agree, like, the Let's Play portion of it itself was not super interesting.
Sure.
It looked pretty much just like, oh, this is a Zelda game.
Okay.
Yeah, which is not a bad thing. But,
right. I mean, that's why we're all gonna play it.
Yeah.
It's because it's a Zelda game.
How far into it did you get?
Honestly, I don't know.
Well, I guess you don't really have any gauge for like
That's
what comes
true.
after. So
right.
It's just like, yeah.
I mean, I did probably have a literal gauge at the bottom of the video. There was a little bar that was slowly filling
Yeah,
up.
but you were Xing out of it too quickly to get to even see that. But no, I mean, long story short, we're of course excited about Breath of the Wild. Give me that soundtrack.
What do you mean?
Like the music.
Oh, I thought
for
you were
this
like
game-
asking me to like cue something up. What do you want me to work? I'm sorry.
No, like the music for this game sounds incredible.
Yeah, it really does.
We still don't know who's doing it, but like
Yeah.
it seems like piano versions of a lot of, like the themes.
Yeah.
It just seems amazing.
Oh man. I was just about to say March can't come soon enough, but then 3 months after March can't come even sooner.
Yeah,
enough.
hopefully like next summer can't come soon enough. In an interview with NintendoEverything.com, THQ Nordic confirmed to be working on 2 games for Switch.
So THQ Nordic, that is, they bought a lot of intellectual property coming out of THQ when that company folded, correct? I don't totally understand what happened, but I think to the best of my understanding, THQ Nordic was like snatching up IP like kind of left and right when those mid-tier publishers were falling out, which is how they get things like Darksiders, which is available on like all platforms right now. And Darksiders 2 was just re-released or remastered for all of the new generation stuff and is coincidentally on sale on all those platforms. But so yeah, it's they've got a wealth of stuff that they could put on the Switch or develop for the Switch.
So what I'm to your point, what I'm not entirely sure is if this is an existing developer, like the original developer of Darksiders and DeBlob, that is also snatching up other IP, or if it's just completely unaffiliated. And it's just weird to have the THQ name back.
Yeah, right. Like where have those guys been? I mean, other than probably folding. Was Quest 64 a game that they made on the Nintendo 64? Do you remember this game?
I remember it, THQ.
Yeah.
Possibly, but are you hoping for a Switch revival?
Yeah, look, I'll be the one guy calling for a Quest 64 sequel.
Had to have been one of the few RPGs on
the
Nintendo 64.
Yeah, and it was, let me tell you, no good.
But they do own like DeBlob and Darksiders. Did you ever play DeBlob?
No, I was going to follow up and ask, what is DeBlob?
Oh, so it was originally a Wii exclusive that was made by THQ, and it's like I guess platformer is not really the right word, but it's a game where the world is like black and white, and you play as this like blob, like not really like paint splotch type thing, and your job in each level is to like add color to all like the walls and stuff like that.
Oh, interesting.
It was I only played the first game, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. I played it at launch, and I think they made it to Blob 2, but it was multi-platform. And I did not play that one.
It looks like the Blob 2 was on PlayStation 3 and maybe just PlayStation 3. Looking it up now.
I think it was at the time when like THQ was just putting everything on everything.
Right.
But yeah, so I didn't play the second one. But yeah, like it's a franchise that, I mean, I could see coming back. Darksiders, I think, obviously, Darksiders 3 is going to be on.
They've got 2 more horsemen to get through, right?
Yeah.
Which? Here, let's test ourselves right now. So, which 2 horsemen have they already done?
I couldn't tell you.
I think it's Death and War.
That makes sense.
What are the other 2?
Like from a commercial standpoint, Death and War.
Oh
would
yeah,
be like the most like.
They're the most obvious. I don't know how
yeah.
you do a pestilence game,
right?
And then what else?
Famine? Yeah.
Yeah, the other ones are weak.
Well, it's just harder to beat up Famine.
Right, sure. But I mean, you play as the Angels of, right? Hey, guess what? I've never played a Darksiders game. But regardless, we're super excited for it to see it on Switch. I don't know. Who knows? Quest 65. That's what I want.
Quest 65. So YouTuber P2P Online released this pitch video for a never developed Diddy Kong Racing adventure game that was a pitch from Climax Studios, who's probably best known for like Silent Hill Shattered Memories.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a pitch to Nintendo that never went any further than just like a pitch document. That it was supposed to have like a full adventure mode, 14 playable characters, a mount system where like you could.
So yeah, what does that mean?
So if you're like riding, I think in the pitch video it shows like Diddy Kong riding a rhinoceros.
Rambi probably.
And you are, you can move to like his head to his back. So and so you can like move to different positions on your mount. And it was gonna have like 4-player split screen multiplayer. This was all like their plan. It never went forward. But
so do you know if
this is for the GameCube?
Oh, for GameCube. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't have been developed by Rare. Then.
No, it was going to be Climax Studios. Like it was Climax Studios like pitched to Nintendo.
Got it.
Unsolicited. So have you played Diddy Kong? Did you play Diddy Kong Racing on the 64?
Diddy Kong Racing, when it came out, was my favorite kart racer.
Oh, okay.
I think it's a better game than Mario Kart 64. Yeah, I love that game. That's where I first met Banjo. That's where I first met Conker. And I love all of those characters, and I don't know why they're not like in still, like why Tip Top the turtle and Pip the mouse. Maybe it's I love the game and I can't remember the characters' names. Maybe that's a good indication as to why they don't exist in other games.
I also think like another reason we don't see Diddy Kong Racing, even like the original on Virtual Console and stuff, is I think it's in that weird like Microsoft Rare quagmire.
Sure. So it was re-released on the DS.
On the DS.
Yeah.
Okay.
I owned that was a release day purchase for me when it came out on DS because I loved it so much.
Who did the port?
I don't know. I think Nintendo did, but yeah. So like Banjo's not in it, and Conker isn't in it either. They're replaced with like maybe it's Donkey Kong. There's another Kong, and maybe it's just 2 other Kongs. But I mean, whatever it is, they take all of the Rare specifics out, and just leave the game as a kind of pure Nintendo experience, which makes sense. Like you can do that. It was such a charming little, piece of the Rare universe.
And I think for Nintendo, because they don't have like Rare to develop it anymore, and they put all of their effort into Mario Kart. Yeah. There's no real point in having a competing kart racer.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, why have 2 competing kart racers on one platform? It doesn't make sense.
But interesting that Climax was going to. Did you play Silent Hill Shattered Memories?
Mm-mm. No, I've only played the first 2 Silent Hill games, and that's it. I know they made a lot of them, but like most of them aren't good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good. Have you?
Yes, I did, and I did not love it as much as it was very well received.
Mm-hmm.
I did not love it like those people did, but it was definitely interesting.
Sure.
There was no like combat, and like when you were being attacked, like your only option was to run. And it had a really interesting system where like the choices you made would like morph the world.
Yeah.
It was very ambitious. I don't think it like worked, and especially narratively, I don't think it worked, but it was definitely ambitious.
So you're saying these guys dodged a bullet by not doing their Diddy Kong racing adventure game and doing Shattered Memories instead?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Another game that never came to be was Wind Waker 2.
Wind Waker, The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker 2.
Yeah. So from the new book that Dark Horse is publishing in the US, The Legend of Zelda Art and Artifacts, there's an interview with artist Satoru Takizawa.
And if you have any complaints about Mark's pronunciation,
and you probably do, because oof,
you can send any of your email complaints to Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com.
They were asked about like Toon Link, And this is what he said. He said, "To tell you the truth, we had begun the initial steps towards creating Wind Waker 2 around that time. However, demand for a more Ocarina-like game was growing by the day. We did our very best with Wind Waker and put everything we had into it. However, Wind Waker 2 would have taken place in a more land-based setting rather than on the sea, so that we could have Link could gallop across the land on a horse. But Link's proportions in Wind Waker weren't very well suited for riding on horseback. He was too short, and an adult version of Toon Link did not seem appropriate either. So while we were stuck on these problems, we became aware of the greater demand for a more realistic, taller Link."
How crazy is it that Nintendo is like the direction of their game is like the character's not tall enough to ride a horse.
Well, it sounds like it's like two things because Wind Waker was not received that well at the time.
I think it was well reviewed. I think it maybe just didn't sell super well.
Right. It sold a little over 3 million copies worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really difficult to imagine at this point because Toon Link is so ingrained in Nintendo.
Yeah.
But Toon Link was very controversial.
Reviled,
People
I would say.
Hated.
People called it Zelda because it was like cell shading.
Right.
Yeah.
So
God, people are awful. Remember a couple weeks ago we were complaining about the internet?
The internet.
This was the internet of its time.
It was the internet.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
I'm saying the internet
has
then
always
was like the internet.
The internet historically has been the internet.
Yes.
Yeah, and so it was absolutely reviled, and when Ocarina, or not when Ocarina, I'm sorry, when Twilight Princess was teased, the wow, what's the word I'm looking for? Like,
I don't know, what are you trying to say?
I'm trying to say like people were their reception of it was,
oh, people were elated?
Sure.
People
Mr. Fancy Pants is not the word I was going for, but
hey, I gave you a word.
Not the word I was looking
People
for.
were way hype. Is that what you wanted to say?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
People were way hype.
But yeah, like it was like explosive.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to me that like they came up against this problem with Toon Link being able to ride a horse, and at the same time, the fans were speaking very loudly that they wanted a more realistic.
Yeah.
And also, like, this was around the time that, the primary color used in video games was brown.
Brown and gray.
And gray. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, of course. A wide palette of brown and gray. And so, we really wanted our Zelda to be like Batman Begins.
Right.
Like, gritty.
It needed to be gritty.
And
he needed to be street smart, but not real smart. We wanted him using words like way hype and not elated.
So yeah,
it's interesting to me that just the direction that Nintendo, they obviously went like hard on trying to give a more realistic, I guess isn't right, but like that grittier kind of.
And let's be honest, it worked. Twilight Princess sold almost like 9 million copies,
which is so many copies,
especially compared to Wind Waker.
Yeah, I mean, it has the benefit of being on a platform that sold like 20 times as many pieces of hardware. The Wii sold more than like anything, but like it's just interesting to me that then the mainline Zeldas have been moving back towards a cartoony look, and that Skyward Sword is a little bit, it has like an impressionistic cartoony style to it, and Breath of the Wild kind of looks like a grown-up Wind Waker in that way.
And I would say like mercifully all of video games has kind of swung back, where even if like this, like even just like palette wise, like color wise,
we're ready to accept color into our hearts again.
Yeah. Speaking of which, let's talk about the Majora's Mask fan animated film.
Yeah. Terrible Fate.
It's about like a 4 minutes animated. We watched it right before we started recording.
Get it on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. which is what free means.
What'd you think?
I liked it. It tells the story of the Skull Kid coming into contact with Majora's Mask for the first time and being taken over by the mask. And like there's no dialogue, I guess, but like a little bit of voiceover, but it's all kind of like incidental. The visual storytelling is strong enough that there's no like spoken narrative that's needed there. The music's great in it. A cool mix of basically just the Lost Woods theme and these like hugely epic choral moments. So I thought it was super cool and definitely something worth checking out. I don't know that it, leads to anything else or is part of something bigger, but it's just cool to see that little bit of Zelda mythology given like careful storytelling treatment.
Yeah, I thought it was visually like really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the music was great. I don't know that I need like a super kind of Lord of the Rings / Terrence Malick like retelling of this story.
Sure.
But and I say this not to criticize the filmmaker who did a really great job, more the discussion around it that like, oh, this should be like a TV series or a movie or something.
I mean that's
the internet.
That's the internet being like, this is a thing I like. It should be in all the forms it can be. No, it's just like we were talking about with just storytelling in games in general. Like you don't like the story in a game in the same way you like a story in a movie, and vice versa.
Tolerate the story in a game.
But even one that you love, even a story that you love, even characters that you love, like if you were just watching it passively in a movie, you'd be like, what is this garbage? I will not tolerate this. And I think what makes Terrible Fate work is that it identifies a mood that the game sets up and just like takes the aesthetics from the game and expresses that mood, and like that's it. It doesn't have to accomplish anything bigger. It doesn't have to set up a 20-hour narrative or a TV show or even a 2-hour narrative. Like that's too much weight to put on something like this. And as a 4-minute video, great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Mark, let's talk new releases.
Well, we could find nothing. I don't know. I mean, it is like a weird like in between time in the holiday. Like Nintendo's already dropped their Pokemon Bomb, and next week is Super Mario Run. So both those things kind of sucked the air out of the room.
We've got no air in this room.
We've got no air in this room.
None.
We are dying, and the only small bit of oxygen that's coming in is maybe Animal Crossing New Leaf Welcome Amiibo, the boxed edition.
Right. This is the retail package,
which means that.
Why don't you tell me who this is for, Mark?
It's for people with no access to the internet.
That's right.
Because if you purchased of the previous boxed version or the previous like eShop version, you could just download the extra content. So maybe if you don't have room on your 3DS, you don't have an SD card, it's for children for the most part.
Sure.
And I don't mean that derisively. I just mean like that's probably who isn't going to download things from the eShop or isn't going to.
Or let's say that you just bought Pokemon Sun and Moon, because that game takes up so much space.
That game is enormous.
It is huge. It is easily the biggest game on my 3DS.
Oh yeah, by far.
Yeah, it's like twice the size of the next biggest game on there for me, which is the Donkey Kong Country Returns port. Is huge. It's like 1,300 blocks or something like that.
I think this was like 2,200.
It's crazy, right? It's so big.
But the box version of Animal Crossing New Leaf Welcome Amiibo comes out on the 8th.
Which is Thursday?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it's for the same price, which is $20.
I mean,
it's a great deal.
What a deal. Mark, let's move on out of the news. Now it's time for a regular segment on our show. It is 4:33. In 1952, American composer John Cage wrote a piece called 4:33, wherein a performer or group of performers didn't play their instruments for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. For the purposes of our show, our instruments are talking about Nintendo. So for the duration of one performance of 4:33, Mark and I will not play our instruments and therefore not talk about Nintendo. And the music will just be the sound of us not doing that. So I'm starting the performance now. Mark, I'd like to talk about PSX, the PlayStation experience that happened this last weekend, and all the fun news that came out of there. Let me ask you this: were you watching any like the press conference or any of the trailers that came out of there?
No, but I caught up with it and
Sure.
like watched the trailers that I was interested in after the fact.
What trailers coming out of PSX get you excited? Get you excited? What did you like? Was there anything interesting in there for you?
I am curious about The Last of Us Part 2.
Yeah, I'm curious and excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Naughty Dog has a pretty good record.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's gonna be bad.
Right.
It feels unnecessary.
From like a storytelling perspective.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it's like great.
Yeah. I'm excited about it. The trailer is nothing basically.
Yeah, it sounds like it's pretty far out.
Yeah. I mean, because they just show like Ellie playing a and she's aged up.
And we learned that Ellie is going to be the main playable character in
Part
2.
Awesome. Love Ellie. Also, there's a guy that enters like halfway through the trailer, who I think everyone is assuming is Joel, but I'm not totally convinced that it is. Joel being the other protagonist from the first Last of Us. I don't know. It could be super cool to like see them on another adventure together, but it would be equally interesting to see her in another context. What else coming out of there was? Oh, actually, I got one that I want to talk about. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinity. Sorry, the crowd at this performance of 4:33 is laughing. So the Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. They ran the first trailer and announced the first 6 characters in the game.
No, it is. Is it always two like on like tag teaming like teams?
So it's always been tag team since it's been Marvel vs. Capcom. But 3 and maybe even 2, I think 2 and 3 had 3-on-3 fights. The first game had 2-on-2 fights. And so the characters that we see in the first trailer are Mega Man X, Ryu from Street Fighter, Morgan from Darkstalkers, and then on the Marvel side, it's Captain Marvel, Iron Man, and Captain America, I think. I'm excited about this game, but I am nervous about rumors that the X-Men won't be in it, because Disney doesn't own the rights to X-Men movies and therefore are not going to be putting that intellectual property into video games, because Wolverine is like a mainstay of those games. Like he's as much a part of Marvel vs. Capcom as like Chun-Li or Ryu. So like, I don't know. I get anxious at the idea that I'm not going to be able to throw down a Tornado Claw or a Berserker Barrage.
Yeah, I think you should get used to it.
No,
because
Mark, come
on. I think that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I'm not much of a fighting game person. I've never been particularly good at them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's cool that they're doing this, especially after Street Fighter V like bombed hard.
Yeah, it did win Best Fighting Game of the Year at the Game Awards. So
in competition with
Killer Instinct, maybe there was a King of Fighters game in there. I don't know.
It's interesting how like niche fighters have become.
Yeah.
It feels like they were bigger at one point. I think when arcades were bigger, fighters were probably bigger.
Yeah, and I mean, I think during the resurgence when 4 was big, I think they were a little less niche at that point too. Are other interesting things coming out of that conference for you?
They're doing a knack too.
Yeah, Knack too,
which
man.
feels like a big joke.
Did you watch the trailer for Knack 2?
No.
I did. I did. I just let like my YouTube just like autoplay trailers. Knack seems like it's a game that's banking on like how cute it is, but it's not cute enough.
Yeah.
That's my read on that.
Resident Evil 7, even though it wasn't like announced there, but I'm excited for that game.
Yeah, I'm a little worried just because it's Resident Evil.
Right.
But yeah, I'm excited about that.
Everything, they brought some people over to Capcom in Japan to play through part of it, like not the demo, like play through some of the actual game. And all the impressions, which, game impressions generally are.
Yeah.
Well, we'll never know.
Oh, yeah, we'll never know how Marco's going to end that sentence. So we grabbed that clip of 433 on Vimeo, and Vimeo doesn't always have all the information, so I don't know who accompanied us today. Mark, let's move into our topic of the week. And of course, we are finishing up. We're rounding out our roundup, that we started maybe a month ago.
Yeah, something like that.
That sounds right. So previously on Nintendo Cartridge Society, we left off with the Nintendo 64 and the Game Boy in all of its permutations. So what's what year? Mark, set us in time. Where are we? When are we? What are we playing?
Game Boy Advance.
Yeah,
came out in March of 2001 in Japan and June 2001 pretty much everywhere else. I think it launched at $99. The SP was at $99, so I'm assuming that
for whatever reason, $129 sticks in my head.
That could be true. I couldn't find a launch price.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Game Boy Advance 2001, the Game Boy original had, and yes, it's various permutations, but over a decade.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean the original Game Boy, it's amazing how much longer the like generations are in the handheld sphere. And I think that's largely just because like Nintendo wasn't taking cues from anyone in the handheld market at this time. Like no one was able to replicate their success like at all. It's not until phones come around to disrupt that. Your Game Gears and your Neo Geo Pockets don't do anything.
I mean, even later, like really, like the PSP and the Vita didn't really disrupt Nintendo's.
I think the PSP came closest, but the Vita doesn't really track on that at all.
But 82 million of the Game Boy Advance sold.
Ooh.
Did you own a Game Boy Advance?
Yeah, I did. The one that I think I spent $129 on. I think I have it. Yeah, it's back there on my shelf. It's in a little case.
And the original one?
Yeah, the original like kind of see-through purple one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it spent the entire time that I lived in Chicago. It just lived in my car, like in one of the back seats, and had a copy of Tetris Advanced in it. And I had declared at that time that it was simply a Tetris machine and should not be used for anything else.
The Game Boy Advance, my younger siblings owned the original.
Mm-hmm.
I later got the Advance SP, but like the NES Special Edition. So like it was like kind of colored like the Nintendo Entertainment System, and the buttons were.
It's the clamshell, right?
Yeah. So the original is just like one like unit. Think of it like kind of like a 2DS.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't like fold or anything, and it had no backlit screen.
Yeah.
And so again, just like the original Game Boy, as soon as it got dark, impossible to play.
Also, you can't take it outside during the day because the glare on the screen is terrible. So too much light or too little light, both are problems.
And the Game Boy Advance, like I guess the easiest way, if you're unfamiliar with it, to describe it is like like the Game Boy was to the original Nintendo, the Game Boy Advance was to the Super Nintendo.
Absolutely.
So I have the SP, which came out in early 2003. It had a frontlit screen. Later, they would release like a version that had a backlit screen.
Yeah.
But the first one had frontlit, so you could play it at night, but it was still not great. And they had the courage before Apple did, because the SPs also didn't have a standard 3.5 millimeter headphone jack.
Did it have like a different headphone
solution? So it had its own like custom headphones, and
that's true courage right there.
That was true courage. This was in 2001, way before the iPhone 7.
Right. Before the towers fell.
But yeah, so my Super Game Boy Advance.
It's okay.
Yeah, my Game Boy Advance.
We can talk about the Super Game Boy as well. I have one.
Yeah. My Game Boy Advance experience was mostly playing Super Nintendo and Nintendo games that I never played on the original systems.
Yeah, so this is kind of the first time that Nintendo's doing this, right? Where they're repackaging their mostly original NES games, but also Super NES games for people who either didn't play them the first time around, or maniacs like me who will buy, The Legend of Zelda every time you put it out on every platform.
Well, and the interesting thing is that the Super Nintendo versions, and even actually like, because they put the Mario games out, and they were different. And the Super Nintendo's, it was necessary because, unlike a Super Nintendo game controller, which had 4 face buttons, the Game Boy Advance only had 2. So
God, that's crazy, and something that I forget about.
So like a game like Link to the Past had to kind of be like changed a little bit, and they would add content here and there. Like Four Swords Adventure, the original one, was on the cartridge with the Game Boy Advance. And so like that was my experience, like was playing a lot of games like that, and then also playing, I remember that was where I played Harvest Moon, Mineral Town, and like Metroid Zero Mission.
Yeah, the Metroid games on this thing, Zero Mission and Fusion, are both great games, and like are up there with the best in the series. The thing has a good library, right? Like, that's where in the States, the first place where you can play a Fire Emblem game, the Golden Sun games are on there, which is this like little Nintendo RPG that like
Camelot developed.
Yeah, that's right. And they're just like kind of standard turn-based RPGs, but like super cool. Isn't that also where the Mario and Luigi series of role-playing games?
Yes, that sounds right. And I also played Final Fantasy Tactics Advance.
Yeah,
on this system, so
it's a good version of that game.
It had a good. Well, it's a completely different game.
Oh, okay.
It's a totally new game. Yeah.
I was just thinking how much of all of them have I played? It's only bits and pieces of all of them. So.
And I also owned the Max Payne port.
And how was that?
Pretty bad. I don't think I did not beat it. But yeah, it had a really good library. But really, like, genuinely, for me, it was more like a catch-up system.
Sure.
I'm sure there was a lot of... Oh, it also had the Castlevania games.
Oh, yeah,
like
that's right.
Kind of like Metroidvania style ones.
Yeah, there are like 3 or 4 that came out on there. There's a piece of Game Boy Advance hardware that I covet and that I wish that I had. And we haven't gotten to this yet, but there's the Game Boy Micro, which is like a teeny tiny version of the Game Boy Advance. I don't know why it dropped the Advance like branding, even though that's what it is. It still is a Game Boy Advance. And it's just a teeny tiny little thing and just looks super sleek. And they resell now for so much money.
Yeah, because it didn't sell very well. The
Is that
Micro
why?
didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, the Micro also, like, one of its big selling points was you could buy faceplates to like change it up, and it also dropped the because the Game Boy Advance was backwards compatible with Game Boy games,
Mm-hmm.
and the micro's so small that you couldn't fit Game Boy cartridges into it.
Too small for the cartridges.
Yeah. And then so 2001 was a big year for Nintendo hardware because they released their follow-up to the Game Boy
Mm-hmm.
earlier in the year, and then in the fall, they released the Nintendo GameCube.
The Nintendo GameCube.
And this launched for $199.
Pretty amazing. Nintendo at this point just being like, no, we're gonna come in like way under everybody else. Because this would have been a contemporary with OG Xbox and PlayStation 2.
Yeah, I don't think the Xbox had launched at this point.
I think that might be right.
I believe the PlayStation 2 had, and then the Dreamcast was out there.
Right. Suffering.
Yep.
Although by 2001, the Dreamcast came out September 9th, 1999.
Oh, right.
Same day as the VMAs. 9999, which is how I remember that, of course. So yeah, this would have been like 2 years later, and the Dreamcast barely had that long of a life. So you and I have talked a little bit on the show about our experiences with the Dreamcast and maybe not remembering
the GameCube.
Yes. Sorry, I've got the Dreamcast on my mind. And now that's all I can think about.
Snap out of it.
No, okay, all right. Yeah, so GameCube, I don't remember getting mine.
No, I don't either. I don't believe it was like a holiday gift or anything. I think it just arrived because we had a tendency in my family
Like
to,
the aliens in Arrival.
like the aliens in Arrival,
Just showed up.
because and there may have been an occasion, but my memory of it is in my family we didn't really buy game systems until like significant price drops.
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing we definitely got ours later in the GameCube life cycle because we had a lot of like player's choice titles.
Sure, and I think you mentioned when we were talking about Luigi's Mansion that you got yours with Mario Sunshine? Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Luigi's Mansion.
Yeah.
But I think it was a player's choice at that point.
Yeah, okay. I think I had Luigi's Mansion before it was a player's choice. So I feel like I must have gotten it early, and like I was in the mindset of getting Nintendo hardware right when it came out. But I just don't remember having like any really strong connections to GameCube games early. I think GameCube was one of their like slow burn systems. What are big titles that you remember playing for this thing?
Super Mario Sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
I remember playing it with my little sister. I agree that the camera is occasionally bad, but I think it's a really fun game.
Yeah, I've never played Sunshine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's one that I wish they would remaster, or it's one I wish that they would make more widely available.
Yeah, I mean it's the GameCube generation is like the perfect, like maybe just a little too big to be like virtual console or like be putting on 3DS or whatever, but not but also like too old that like the modern systems can't play them. So yeah, I would love to be able to play that game. Obviously Resident Evil 4.
Yeah, I
Right?
mean the Resident Evil remake, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil
0.
0.
Mm-hmm.
I mean Resident Evil 4 was, yeah, that was like a huge revelation to me.
Right. And all three of those games I like a lot. And actually, I ended up because they re-released Resident Evils 2 and 3 on the GameCube as well. And I don't know why, because I had them on other platforms, but I was just like, no, the GameCube is my Resident Evil machine now. And I think that's most of what I had on that thing.
I don't really love 0.
Okay, well, you're allowed not to really like 0.
It's not a bad game. It just feels like kind of like a retread.
Yeah,
of things
mhm.
like 1, 2, and 3 had done much better.
Yeah, but it does them looking the way Remake does.
Right.
Which, if they were to do a remake of 2 that looked like Remake. I mean,
They are working on a remake of 2.
they are working on a remake of 2, but
Supposedly.
I am not convinced that it's going to be 2 in any way that I recognize.
Yeah, I think that's a fair bet. I feel like we'd be remiss to talk about the GameCube without talking about the controller.
Oh yeah, that controller, man. And not just so the controller itself is weird, right? But I think the thing that the GameCube does better than the Wavebird controller, the first like wireless controller that actually worked. Mark, did you ever have wireless controllers before the Wavebird?
No.
Where like you plug a sensor into the machine, and then you have to like line up the sensor on the front of the controller with the sensor in front of they never worked. Like it was always a mess. And yeah, the Wavebird was the first one to like really just work all the time, and you could be anywhere in the room. Yeah, and the just overall, the GameCube controller has become the controller of choice for Smash players, to the point where on the when Smash 4 for the Wii U was coming out, they released an adapter so that you could use old GameCube controllers on it.
And didn't they, in limited numbers, re-release like GameCube controllers?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's how in demand. Putting out controllers from 2 generations back, which is crazy. Like no one does that.
But the GameCube controller's very interesting because the other consoles were dual
analog
sticks, and Nintendo kind of fudged it. They have one analog stick and then the C stick,
right,
which
is like
is
an
not
analog
a real,
nub.
Yeah, it's really difficult to describe, and it feels weird.
That's right. Like the texture of it was like a softer plastic or
Yeah.
like rubber almost.
But overall, like it's a really good controller. Terrible for third-party games. Luckily, the GameCube did not get very many of those.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and the GameCube also did this thing, the controller, where it had like one main button that like there's the big red or big green A button, and then a smaller B button, and then X and Y were kind of like bean shaped, circling. The like the focus is on like the one big button, and that's such like an intuitive thing that like everyone has tossed away basically since. That like have a main button like that, just everyone can be like, oh yeah, that's the main button.
Well, and I think that's partly why it's the go-to controller for Smash.
Yeah,
because you use that as like so much, use that as like your main attack so often.
Yeah.
Mario Kart Double Dash.
Yeah.
Was the GameCube iteration,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say it's the worst Mario Kart.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mario Kart Advance.
Oh yeah, no, that's a real dog.
That may be
Yeah.
right. Those are both hard ones to love. Although I know people that have defended Double Dash to me.
People like it.
There
are people that like it. It feels slow to me.
Sure.
And I think that might partly be by design because you are juggling 2 characters and like 2 item boxes.
Mm-hmm. And you can be playing it 2-player, like 2 people controlling the one cart.
Yeah, but like the multiplayer maps aren't that interesting.
Yeah.
The maps in general, I don't think are super interesting.
Hey, you got that baby park.
You got that. You do like.
You do indeed got that baby park.
You do indeed got that baby park.
We would be remiss not to mention the Metroid Prime series, which starts on GameCube.
Mm-hmm.
And the sequel, Echoes. Yeah, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. Both amazing games. Prove that Metroid can be something other than the side-scrolling explory platformer that it was. And really, it takes like the Metroid formula and just like pops it into 3D.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah,
that they were able to pull it off.
Yeah, because like it looks and plays like a first-person shooter, but like No, it's a Metroid game. It's based in exploration and finding items and puzzle solving on like a huge world kind of basis instead of like micro puzzles.
You got Wind Waker, which we discussed a little earlier, which time has been very kind to.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, that was actually the first game I've ever pre-ordered.
Oh, interesting.
Because I went to the EB Games in my mall.
Yeah.
Because you got a
this disc.
Yeah, you got a disc that had Ocarina of Time
Mm-hmm.
and Master Quest on it.
Yeah, I had that same thing. I remember going to the mall when Wind Waker came out. This was in Appleton, Wisconsin. I was in college at this point. And picking it up and being so excited to have Ocarina again, even though it was one generation back. I probably last played Ocarina like 2 years before that.
But I mean, it was also when the GameCube was the first Nintendo system to use discs of a sort. It was its own like proprietary mini disc.
It's a little disc.
Yeah,
it's a little.
So it you couldn't play, and there was no virtual console, so you couldn't, unless you had your Nintendo 64, you weren't able to play.
Yeah,
this game on, and the Master Quest was totally new.
Yeah, which is just a reshuffling of everything in the game.
Yeah, it's mirrored, right? Like the dungeon, and it's more difficult.
I know it's more difficult, and like it just moves everything around.
I thought the temples were mirrored.
I mean,
but
maybe they are also that. Yeah, I don't. I never played through it. I know I started it, and I think the Master Quest is available on the 3DS version of Ocarina as well. But anyway, GameCube.
Yeah, I mean, this was also the time when Nintendo began to fall behind. Isn't real like it just
it's not charitable or even accurate necessarily, because they were already falling behind.
Right, but it was like you could play Smash or like Mario Kart with multiplayer, but it required like LAN cables, and this was when like Xbox Live was beginning to, like, Halo was beginning to really blow up.
Well, I mean, Xbox saw that in a way, or Microsoft saw that in a way that no one else was chasing. Like PlayStation 2 didn't have a meaningful online presence either,
Yeah, that's true. But it was just like one example, because again, it wasn't really getting third-party ports.
Mm-hmm.
It was becoming the GameCube was a very Nintendo system in a way that no system had been before.
Yeah, well,
like the controller was weird compared to the other ones.
The discs are weird.
The discs were weird. Like, it was very much Nintendo doubling down and being like, we're going our own way, and you're either coming with us or you're not.
Right.
And the rest of the industry looked at the like the how easy it was on, and the bigger console base on between the PlayStation 2, which was a beast,
right,
and the Xbox, and they were like, okay, check you later.
Yeah, I mean, this is also sort of the start of game consoles being more than like just the place where you play games. Both the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox were playing DVDs.
And DVDs were huge at this, or like were becoming huge at this point.
Yeah, so like you would get a PlayStation 2 because like that could be your DVD player, and yeah, why not? You can play Metal Gear Solid 2 or Final Fantasy X or whatever. Yeah, and Nintendo was like, nope, we're not doing that. You can't even play CDs on this thing because they're too big. So one of the other cool things that the GameCube that they came out, a accessory for the GameCube, was the Game Boy Player, which allowed you to play your Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games on your TV through the GameCube.
And it sat on top. The GameCube, you like the Game Boy Player locked into the bottom of the GameCube, right?
That's right. Yeah, in sort of like a reverse slapping the 32X into the Genesis, which is an experience probably no one has had. But this is what it was. It went on the bottom of the GameCube, yeah. And just like we talked last time about the Super Game Boy, which goes into the top of the Super Nintendo like a Super Nintendo game, and you can play Game Boy games on that. So just hey, Nintendo has always been trying to put your handheld games on your TV. Like the Switch is not a new concept for them.
So the GameCube, obviously not a success.
Sure.
22 million sold, which up until the Wii U was its worst selling console, other than the Virtual Boy. Never shall we speak its name again.
Never again? Mark, you and I have to talk about Nintendo for like 2 hours every week. How are we not going to talk about Virtual Boy?
If you want to break the rule, that's fine.
I will, thank you.
So 20.
I'm so mad at you right now.
The best-selling game was, no surprise, Super Smash Bros. Melee, which sold about 7.1 million units. That is an insane attach rate for 22 million consoles sold.
Yeah, it's a third. That's crazy.
And also the GameCube, Nintendo dropped the price to it was $99 for a very long time because they just were not selling.
Right. Well, and because there's just wasn't a whole lot of third-party support, and the other two players were becoming juggernauts at this point. Melee, Smash Brothers Melee, we don't have to talk about it for very long, but it boggles my mind that is still like the Smash Brothers of choice for tournament players. That like the fighting game community, as niche as it is just super in love with that game, and they will never move on.
No, they mod the newer games.
Yes, to be more like Melee. Yeah. Incredible.
Melee was when they nerfed Pikachu. He was so powerful in the 64 version, and he was my character of choice. And from Melee on, he's just been not as cool.
Well, Melee is also the first Smash Brothers that turns, because the original Smash Brothers on Nintendo 64 was just like the 8 characters, right? Mario, Peach, Yoshi,
Link,
Bowser. Maybe Bowser's not even in there.
Pikachu. Donkey
Kirby
Kong.
and Donkey Kong. Not a lot.
Yeah.
I wasn't counting. I was touching my fingers like I was counting, but I had no idea where we were in that
Was
count.
Fox in the 64 one?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
know.
Yeah,
I think he was. But Melee is where it really like starts to blow the doors off of like who can be in these games. And I think that's when it really cements itself as like a franchise that is going to, kind of buoy Nintendo through the decade that follows.
And consistently almost kill Sakurai.
Yes, that's right.
In 2004, starting in 2004, in like November of 2004, the Nintendo DS began to roll out.
The Nintendo DS.
At $149.99 US. This system, in all of its iterations, sold 154 million units.
That's so many units. Mark, were you one of those units?
I 3 times over.
Really?
Possibly 4 times over.
I think I just owned the one.
I had the original, which was
the
chunky
fat,
and terrible.
Yeah.
I had the light, which was polar white. I had the polar white one.
That's where I hopped on, and what color I hopped on with.
The white was, or not the white. The light was like impossible to get. This was hot
ticket. Hot ticket.
And then I had, this was either after the DSi had come out. I had 2 DSi's. I had the Legend of Zelda like collector one that was gold, and then I had another one that was red.
Okay, we'll get to the DSi's because I never owned one, so I am still a little bit fuzzy on what exactly it is. But so let's just talk about our DS experience first. So you got you had the original like fat chunky clamshell one.
Yeah, I had asked for it for Christmas, and I got it. Came with a demo for Metro Prime Hunters.
That's right,
and included like the weird like thumb.
Oh my gosh, you had that thing?
Yeah, because it came in the box of the original.
Oh, that's amazing.
And then,
so what this thing was? So the DS, did it not have any analog?
Yeah,
stick?
I think it just had a D-pad.
It just had a D-pad. So to play a first-person shooter like Metroid Prime Hunters, you needed to do some of the analog control on the touch screen, which we're jumping all over the place with this thing. So this was a handheld that was at least expressly not intended to replace the Game Boy, but act as a third pillar to Nintendo strategy.
And that was huge because when the DS was announced, it was kind of laughed at.
Yeah.
Especially compared to the PSP, which was launching and announced around the same time.
Right.
It was underpowered. It was weird. It had 2 screens.
One of them is a touch screen.
One of them was a touchscreen, which was like the primary input for a lot of games. It was ugly. So Nintendo was kind of taking a gamble. And so they were hedging their bets by saying the DS is a third pillar.
Especially because the Game Boy brand was so successful.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to burn that bridge of... Everyone loves the Game Boy, you know. The kids who are playing Pokemon love it, and your dad who plays Tetris love it, you know.
So they were hedging their bets that if this fails, if it's then we'll just bring back the Game Boy.
Right.
Well, a new iteration of the Game Boy.
Game Man.
Game Man.
It sounds like Gay Man.
And that's fine.
Right. Of course. Get that Gay Man system out of here.
But and just like the before it, the Game Boy Advance was kind of a Super Nintendo analog. The Nintendo DS was kind of a Nintendo 64 analog. In fact, one of the games around launch was a kind of like a an enhanced port in some aspects of Super Mario 64.
Right. The ways in which it is not enhanced is that
it controls poorly.
It controls very poorly.
It's
again,
ugly.
It has no analog input other than touching the screen.
But it had more characters.
It did. You could play as Yoshi, Luigi, and Wario.
In fact, the game you start as
Yoshi, right?
Yoshi outside of the castle.
So weird.
Yeah.
Did they port that to anywhere where you can play it with analog sticks?
Yeah, I think it is on the Wii U now.
It might be.
Recently, within the past couple of months. It also had mini games.
Yes.
And I think
those mini games weren't just on that though. They were also on New Super Mario Brothers, which that's a franchise that we are super familiar with now because there've been like 4.5 if you want to count New Luigi U. But yeah, this was the first time that we were getting a like brand new side-scrolling Mario adventure since Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo. So it was a big deal, and it had the same set of mini games.
Oh, okay.
I played those mini games more than I played the Super Mario 64 port. I had the card, but I just played the mini games on it.
Well, so when I got my original DS, I got it for Christmas, and the game I was able to get at launch was that like Touch the Magic, like XXYY game or whatever.
Okay.
And it was like a collection of mini games, that it was so weird. There were so many weird games, especially at launch on the Nintendo DS, because they wanted to make use of the touchscreen.
Yeah, yeah.
And another game that was like impossible to find was the WarioWare game.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first WarioWare game I had played.
Oh, okay.
Was the one on the DS.
Was that the WarioWare DIY?
No, I think it was called Touch.
Okay.
Or like Touched or something.
Yeah, WarioWare DIY may have been a Game Boy one. It doesn't matter.
But the DS is maybe my favorite system of all time.
So let's talk other great DS games. The Mario Kart on DS was phenomenal.
First one to have online.
Yeah, that's right. Did you ever play it on? Did you
yeah,
ever take
absolutely.
It
Because
me
it worked
too.
fairly well. Like it was, yeah.
Yeah, I was getting a DS. So I got it when the DS Lite came out, and so I was picking it up as I was graduating from college, and everyone else, also graduating and leaving, and I I don't know why I went on like an offensive of like everyone needs to buy one of these so that we can play Mario Kart with each other, even though we don't live in the same building anymore. So yeah, I played a ton of Mario Kart the year after college with my friends who had all just moved away. Yeah, so I feel very close to it for that reason.
And it's a great version of Mario Kart. It has like Chrono Trigger. So here was the great thing about the Nintendo DS.
Yeah.
Is it had a ton of great original games.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also had a ton of great retro games that were either being remade, like Final Fantasies, like Final Fantasy 3 this was the first time it was ever released in the West.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Was
right?
like the remake of like Final Fantasy 3. And like the version of Chrono Trigger on here is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also had great new games like the Mario Kart and the Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass
and Spirit Tracks.
which I don't like Spirit Tracks.
I think I prefer Spirit Tracks to the other one.
And a lot of people do. I think Phantom Hourglass is the better game, even with the temple
that
of
you had
the
to revisit.
Ocean King.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it had something for everybody.
Wait, hold on. I want to go back to Phantom Hourglass.
Yeah.
It's Phantom Hourglass, that's the one that has Linnebeck in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Then maybe that is the better game. Because that's a cool character. I like that character.
And like Phantom Hourglass, again, it was like one of these things where you control Zelda using the touchscreen.
Right.
Like that's your primary input. Like
Right.
to make him roll, you like tap it in the direction you want him to roll.
You are also
Link,
controlling Zelda.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Yes, Link.
Right. You're controlling them both because Zelda is dead. She's a ghost.
Right.
Those games are really neat.
Well, and they take place in the Wind Waker, like Toon Link, like universe. There's sailing in Phantom Hourglass, and you like get treasure out of the ocean.
Yep.
Like, and the touch controls they work really well, and they're very intuitive. Like, I think that's a great game. I don't like Spirit Tracks, but I understand that people enjoy it.
Again, I've never been madder at you.
So yeah, the DS is just was an amazing system.
And so the DS is also like blowing up for Nintendo, right?
Mm-hmm.
In an era when the GameCube is not.
Yeah, and the Wii had not yet hit the scene.
Right.
When this was launched. And at launch it did not like blow the world away, the DS. It took a little time to get going.
I mean kind of by the time it reinvented itself as the DS Lite, that's when it really starts to gain traction. And it's one of those cases where I think like people were just sort of waiting for like the form factor of the thing to be better.
Well, and I also think what happened was this was before iPhones. This was before games on your phone. And just like Tetris blew up the Game Boy because it was something everybody wanted to play.
Mm-hmm.
Like the DS became a device for quote unquote casual gamers.
Yes.
With games like
Brain
Training. Yeah, Brain Age.
Right.
We
just both stared at each other like, oh god, who's wrong?
But
or Nintendogs.
Yeah, but I mean like specifically like Brain Age was like Today's Show. This was like, and so you were not just selling it to people who wanted to play Chrono Trigger, you were selling it to moms and dads in the same way that the Game Boy sold for Tetris, in the same way the Wii would sell later for like Wii Fit and things like that. Like and that sort of market doesn't exist anymore because like it's hard to imagine it ever existed because the iPhone and everybody having phones and games on their phone is so ingrained in us now.
Yeah.
But less than 10 years ago, there was a huge appetite for these sorts of casual games, and in order to play them, people had to buy a Nintendo DS.
Yeah, that's crazy. Let's talk a little bit about the DSi, and then I think we're going to do a part 3 of this because we're going long.
Oh,
here.
Okay.
I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah,
we stopped right before the Wii generation. All right, cool. So DSi, I know it's got. Is the camera a new addition?
Yeah, so the camera was new. The big thing, like the eye, was that it could connect to the internet.
Oh, okay. But the other one could too.
But it had a store.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. It had like an eShop where you could buy DSi exclusive games.
So this would be the first. That's the first place that there's an online store to buy Nintendo games.
Well, the Wii U had come out in 2006, and
Oh.
I think the eShop launched with it. The DSi doesn't come out until 2008.
Oh, I see. The
Yeah.
Wii comes out in 2000.
Yes, yeah. But so and there were theoretically games that could only be played in the DSi, like cartridge games, but those were very few and far between.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like it's the big thing was that it was it had, was that it had like the DSi shop with like indie games on it and things like that. It was also, I believe, the first time they released a XL version of the DS. So like the larger screens. Yeah.
I know that every time I buy a 3DS now, there's like a little thing prompting me to like, now we'll check to move over any of your DSiWare games. DSiWare is what it was called. So like that's a little piece of that they're carrying forward even to this day.
Well, the DSi, okay, so like the DS Lite sold like 94 million units. So out of the 154 million sold, 94 were the DS Lite. The DSi sold about like 29 million.
So about a third, somewhere between a third
about
and
like
quarter.
a third, but not an insignificant number. So there might still be people that have some DSi.
Oh yeah, no, I don't doubt it.
Well, I was just trying to think of like if I knew of any titles that were on. Do you remember Dark Void? It was there's no reason you should, but it was a like Capcom game that was made by a Western developer. I think it was Capcom, and you were kind of like the Rocketeer. Like its big selling point was you had like a rocket pack. And it was your typical like shooter, but that was like and I don't think it reviewed very well, but I think there was a DSiWare exclusive like side scroller platformer that was also based on the Dark Void, I think that's what it was called.
Yeah, I
IP.
I have almost no memory of this.
All
right.
But no, I was just trying to think of any like of DSiWare games, and I can't, but I think that was one of them.
I just brought up the DSi Wikipedia page to see if I could find any DSiWare titles. And I was reminded here of the Guitar Hero peripheral for
right
for
that's
DS.
almost like a like the trumpet, like the trumpet keys.
So it's 4 buttons that go into the Game Boy Advance slot, which by the way, this thing could play Game Boy Advance games. You're welcome.
I don't think the DSi version could.
Yeah,
I think the other
right.
I think the other ones were able to.
But yeah, you plug this thing into the Game Boy Advance slot, and there was like a little strap that went over your hand, and then you had these 4 buttons, not 5, but 4, and had to try to play guitar and strum on the touch screen.
But this was also when Guitar Hero was an enormous success.
Oh, absolutely. And I had one of these things.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
For the DS?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was so hard to play it because again,
it'd be so cramped. It seems like it would hurt your like.
Yeah, you and I are big men.
We're very big men.
We're very big men.
We're huge.
We have big man hands. No, it was almost impossible.
Yeah,
like it and also the input on like strumming on the screen was imprecise too. So like I remember not being able to play Barracuda because like doing the like
it just seems like it would hurt so bad to have like doing that with one hand and like playing the keys with one hand and then trying to strum with using a stylus or even your finger with the other hand.
Did you know this? That it came with a pick
stylus.
Boo. No, it was great. The illusion was complete. I thought I was a rock god.
But again, this was another system where third parties outside of like Western third parties just did not really get on board and had a hard time with. Like it was a huge deal when Rockstar announced Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars,
Yeah.
which was an original Grand
Mhm.
Theft Auto game for the DS, and it was just the wrong market. It's a
Yeah.
great game.
Mhm.
It's just the wrong market. It lives on your phone. You can buy it on the App
Right.
Store. But yeah, just
Not totally a dead end for Japanese third-party developers.
no,
though.
not
Like,
at all.
the
Not at all.
Square Enix and like Capcom were both finding
Konami.
success.
There
on that.
were
Yeah, Konami.
again great Castlevania games released on it.
And who made Contact? Contact or like
It was Clover, wasn't it?
I think that's right.
Yeah, when Clover still existed.
And
Oh no, or was it?
we
Yeah, it
gotta,
was-
gotta
yeah,
look it
we
up.
have to
Gotta
look
look
it
it up. But in addition to that, Square Enix had The World Ends With You.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever play that game?
No.
It was so cool. It had a using the dual screen like to its fullest. All the combat was like a top screen, bottom screen simultaneous, and one screen was being controlled with like the D-pad and buttons, and the other screen was being controlled with stylus, and you had to like spend a little bit of time like making this person do stuff with the stylus, and then like switching over to the buttons. It was really cool and had this like very Persona-esque sense of style about it. And there's like all these little bits of like J-pop and idol culture in there. It was just a really cool, way Japanese story.
It was also the first time that I ever played the Phoenix Wright games.
Yeah.
And
Layton starts there too, right?
Yep, Professor Layton from level 5.
Holy cow,
no,
man.
The DS is an amazing system. Like we spent quite a bit of time like talking about the technical aspects and like the different iterations, but man, I cannot sing the praises of the DS enough. It's has an incredible library, maybe the best library of games on any system ever. It was like controlled well, especially like later when they stopped trying to cram, like they gave up on trying to do first person shooters. They gave up because it wasn't really a system that was set for it. I think they felt kind of boxed in by the PSP before the PSP didn't become as big of a success as the Nintendo DS.
Right. Well, and I mean, we could probably have a whole different conversation about why the PSP was successful, but like there are basically two reasons that thing was as successful as it was one, it was easy to
pirate.
Mm-hmm.
The DS hack. Was too.
Yeah, sure, yeah. But it had more space and power to run whatever you wanted on it.
Yeah.
But also Monster Hunter was on PSP.
Yeah.
And not on.
And that's when
DS.
it was Monster Hunter was exploding. Dragon Quest 9.
Yeah.
Was on is on the DS, which was again like a huge. If you didn't live through it, it's really difficult to explain to you like how much the DS was laughed at.
This is your Vietnam.
Yeah. It really is, because like everybody expected the PSP to wipe the earth. Yeah. With the Nintendo DS, the DS was underpowered. The DS, it didn't have analog sticks.
It was basically singing the same song as the that was sung in the GameCube versus PlayStation 2. Like this, the same sort of things, and the PlayStation 2 obviously trounced the GameCube. Like if we're going to subscribe to any sort of console war nonsense,
which we do,
which of course we do.
Winners and losers,
right?
Our new segment. But I will say the one distinction between the two is that the PlayStation 2 was less powerful than the Nintendo GameCube. The Nintendo GameCube was the most powerful system of that generation, whereas the DS was
not
significantly less than and PlayStation was coming off that PS2 swagger. They were in the middle of that PS2 swagger, so they're like, great, we're like honing in on Nintendo's territory.
Right.
We took the home, we're going to take the portable. And the PSP was not a failure by any means, but like the DS, put it in the winner column.
Oh my goodness. Contact was made by Grasshopper manufacturer.
And I think that, did they put a port of the silver briefcase on?
Geez, I just don't know. It looks like it was also developed by Atlas. So who knows?
Oh, that makes sense. There are so many Atlas RPGs on this that are going to cost you like $100 now because Atlas doesn't print a lot of their games. And man, there if you're an RPG fan, there was a ton for you here. Man, I just can't stop talking about how much I love the DS. Now it makes me sad that some of the stuff is not available or attainable anymore.
Yeah, I mean that is something though, that if you have your old carts, your 3DS will play them.
That's true.
They're like washed out or stretched out. I've never played a DS game on my 3DS.
It's not exact, but and also the other nice thing is because it sold so well, if you wanted to buy one secondhand,
you can do it. Yeah.
The system itself and a lot of the games are easily attainable.
Right. And in fact, it's some of the easier ways to play Game Boy Advance games now is go get a DS Lite and slap a Game Boy Advance game into there.
Man, Sharon the Wanderer was the first time I played on like the DS. So many good games on the DS.
Whew. All right, Mark, we gotta stop that there, and we'll be back for a part 3, surprise part 3. But now let's move into listener reader questions. Today's question is one that I put off last time. It is a question from Ethan. Ethan's email reads, "Hi guys. If you need a question for one of your episodes."
I didn't know if I was supposed I don't know if he was also waiting for me to respond.
You should listen to your heart. If you want to say hi or if you want to jump in, I'll start over, okay?
Okay.
Hi guys. If you need a question for one of your episodes, here's something I've been thinking about.
I chose not to.
I know.
Okay.
I enjoy couch co-op games, but it's not a feature that many developers prioritize. Some memorable examples include Kirby Superstar, the Sonic Tails Knuckles games, Borderlands 2, Diablo 3, and several of the entries in the Halo franchise. What are some of your favorite Nintendo couch co-op games? What is an example of a Nintendo game or franchise that you would like to have this option? What's a Nintendo franchise that you'd like to see add couch co-op in the future? And it goes on to say, absolutely adore the podcast. It's easily his new favorite. Mark, well, first, Ethan, thank you for that email and saying flattering things about the show. That's very nice of you. Mark, how do you feel about couch co-op?
Oh, man, I think it's one of the things we've talked about it in the past, like Nintendo values it in a way that no other like party game is not like the right term, but man, like throw on Mario Kart or Super Smash Brothers or like even like Wii Sports, you know, and it's just great. It's fun to play with people in the room.
Yeah, agreed.
He brings up Kirby Superstar for the Super Nintendo. Man, that's another one that I have like so many memories of playing through with my little sister and that is a great game.
Yeah, it is amazing to me like how many of like Nintendo's experiences seem more at home with someone else on the couch than like as isolated solitary experiences. Even with the NES Classic, there aren't a lot of 2-player simultaneous games in there, but like I've put definitely more hours into playing Dr. Mario with my girlfriend than I think anything else on that system so far. So yeah, I think Nintendo's awesome at it. Even now, you know, a couple weeks ago when we were playing Super Mario 3D World with Fodl, the three of us and Sarah all playing together. That's a great time, you know?
The new Super Mario Brothers are really fun to play together. Yeah, I wish more console makers or more game makers would focus on being able to play with your friends in the same room.
Yeah. Because I mean, obviously, online is like part of the future, but like, man, there's nothing quite like, you know, popping in a game and playing with a friend. Do you have any examples of a couch co-op game and not Nintendo that you've enjoyed recently? That may be too hard of a question to spring on you like that.
No, honestly, the last time I remember playing couch co-op on a system other than a Nintendo system is on the Xbox 360, playing through Call of Duty World at War, I think it was called. It was the one after Modern Warfare where they went back to World War II, and it was on like the Western Front, Eastern Front. It was like it took place primarily in like the islands, like Japan on the ocean. And it went back to having split screen co-op, which I don't think Modern Warfare did for the campaign. But the earlier Call of Duties had, and I played through that with a friend. And I think this is the last time I can remember, maybe outside of a racing game or a fighting game, where I like really played a game with somebody else on not a Nintendo console.
I recently, not recently, this is over the summer now, but played Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time. Are you familiar with this game?
No, I'm not.
So it is a necessary couch co-op game. You can't play it single player, where you're two little people in a spaceship, and it's like a side view of the spaceship, and there are different stations, like different guns, like a north-facing gun, or I guess up, left, right, down, and then like one station that flies the ship and another one that controls where the shields are. So you have to like run your characters around the spaceship in order to grab hold of different stations and move your spaceship around and work together like that.
And what system was this on?
So it's on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Super fun. Real hard learning curve. Like the first maybe 2 or 3 hours were like you're just eating it like over and over again, but then like once you get in sync and like understand the game and understand how to work together and like who prefers to do what, like it's really a cool experience.
Yeah, that sounds really fun. I it's probably true that on like the PS4 and the Xbox One that indie developers have taken up, if you're going to find couch co-op games, they're probably going to come from indie developers.
Yeah, and you know that makes a lot of sense because like when you're an indie developer, you have to find like the fun or the hook or whatever, and not stress so much about, you know, making Watch Dogs or whatever. So I loves me some couch co-op.
No, I'm trying to think of, while we've been talking, I've been trying to think of what franchise, like what Nintendo franchise I would want couch co-op in.
Got any ideas there? It's tough, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think I'd like a couch co-op 3D Mario game. As they're saying, the Switch may well be, or Mario Switch or whatever this game is going to be.
I don't know how it would work, so I'll throw that out there. That I don't have any idea, like I don't have any grand ideas, but I think it could be super fun to play through a Paper Mario game.
Oh, that would be fun
with somebody else. I don't know how it would work, but I think it would be fun, especially as like the combat has become more actiony. It seems like there might be opportunity there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I just had one.
Wii Sports? Were you thinking Wii Sports?
Oh, I was thinking of Wii Sports. Is what I. That's right, Mark. How did you know? Wii Sports.
I was also thinking of Wii Sports.
Okay, good. No, I don't remember.
Well, what about like the yarn games, like Kirby
and Yoshi?
Yeah, like do those have co-op?
Yeah, they do.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's basically just you have two characters on the screen, and you know in Kirby it's a no fail state game anyway, and you know Yoshi is so much about exploration and not about just making it to the goal as it is that. Having a second player on the screen doesn't really help, but it's fun. And Sarah and I have played through. I'm not sure I've played Epic Yarn. Wait, Woolly World. I'm not sure I've played Woolly World by myself. I think I've only played it with Sarah.
And I think there is potentially room for a new couch co-op Kirby game.
Yeah, absolutely. and I really like any of them. I would play any Nintendo game, couch co-op. I still want to play Star Fox, the 2-player version of it where you're both like in the same R-wing. One of you flies and the other one guns. Because it's too much for one person to handle, as far as I'm concerned. Anything else jump to mind as what you'd want to see?
No, just if you have your, like, as listeners,
Yeah,
idea of like an idea for a couch co-op Nintendo game.
Yeah, you can shoot that to us at Nintendo Cartridge Society
At gmail.com.
And we'll talk about those next week. That's going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Before I get into the spiel, Mark, you still want these spoilers,
thank you for
right?
reminding me. Yeah.
I was getting nervous because you weren't like waving your hands in my face to be like, "No, Patrick, stop! I need to ask about spoilers."
No. Yeah. M. Night Shyamalan Split comes out fairly soon. I think within 6 weeks or something.
We don't have a release date yet.
January something. There probably is a release date. I am just not aware of it at the moment.
Sure. If someone wants to spoil the release date for us, that's fine too.
That's fine too. But yeah, like there's a big twist at the end. I'm never going to see this movie. I know the spoilers are out there. Believe me, I have searched for them as recently as a few weeks ago with no luck. So if you are better at Google than me, please share them with us at our email address,
which of course is Nintendo Cartridge Society
at gmail.com.
So that will do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. You can always follow us on Twitter at NinCart Society. You can check out our Facebook page, which is just Nintendo Cartridge Society. If you have a second and would like to rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes, that'd be great. While you're there, you can check out some of the other shows on the What's a Creative Podcast Network. If you like our show, there are other shows that are like our show on that network. Check them out. Also, I was just on an episode of Tall, Dark, and Broody, which is a podcast about the TV show Angel. That's on the not What's a Creative. They're on the Nerdist School Network. If you like Mark and Mine's opinions, you can check out our comic book reviews and discussions on retconpunch.com. Olivia Duncan made our logo. And 8-Bit Betty does our music. You can check out 8-Bit Betty's music on 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers saying, man, that DS library was awesome. Thanks for listening.
What's a Creative Podcast Network?